Good morning. There are a few of you way back there. Come on up here. We're an intimate, big group. I am Jessi Hempel. I'm a senior writer with Fortune magazine, and I chair our summer Fortune Tech Conference, Brainstorm Tech. And I am here this morning with a great opportunity, and that is the opportunity to interview Aaron Levie, who is the CEO and a co-founder of an enterprise software company called Box. Who here in the room has heard of Box? Excellent. And just because we're at South by Southwest and it's 9:30 in the morning, just to make sure, who here in the room is sober? Okay, just checking. All right, so I want to welcome Aaron to the stage right now. Aaron, you back there? Give him a big hand.
Okay, very good. So we have some standing room available in the back. Very good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you get that chair right there.
Didn't we do like a Groupon for this? What happened?
I know you guys had to work in with our invisible friends.
This is everybody that cares about enterprise software in Austin right now.
Again, you're missing the invisible friends we have sitting out right.
We do have some spaces that we wanted to save for our symbolic attendees.
All right, so a couple of things that you guys should know about Box before we get started. It's 2014. Box has raised close to $400 million. It's valued at around $2 billion. And it's rumored to have filed for an IPO later in the year. Of course, Aaron's not going to comment on that, but it's expected to be one of the more exciting things that I get to cover as a tech reporter this year. But of course, that's not what we're really here to talk about. Box has some news this morning, right?
Yes. Well, we do just a small piece of interesting news. We in our last round of funding, we actually brought in Ashton Kutcher and Guy Oseary into the round as a strategic push into the media and entertainment industry. So this is one of the markets that we actually serve pretty significantly, and so we're in Disney, Paramount, Sony Music, Warner Music, Universal Music, and a bunch of the media companies in Hollywood use Box to basically manage all their information and content. And so we're working with Guy and Ashton to push even harder in that space. So that was something that we just announced this morning.
So when you say you're in the entertainment industry significantly, like what are folks using Box for?
Yeah. So what tends to happen is if you think about all the digital information that gets created in that business, it's actually one of the more content-centric and information-centric industries that exist. And yet the IT systems in this industry tend to be lagging a lot of the technology that is sort of at the bleeding edge. So what we've tried to do is go into the industry and help them change how they're managing their content and information. So if you can centralize all your digital assets and effectively get an inventory system for your digital content, you can make better decisions. You can share much more efficiently. You can collaborate across all the different boundaries that an entertainment company needs to be able to work within. And so we're trying to bring the cloud to Hollywood.
So what's interesting there, of course, Aaron, is that you sort of started your career in Hollywood, right?
Yes, but not in the way that sentence sounds. So I was an intern at Miramax.
And a great intern.
I was a mediocre intern. Did you see like a different file on me or something?
No.
Okay.
Wikipedia said.
Okay, that's what I wrote. But no. So I was probably like, if you had to give an intern a grade, I'd probably be like a B- intern. But I was interning at Miramax and Paramount in LA, and that was actually the same time that we were building Box. So we started Box our sophomore year of college, and
who's the we?
My co-founder and I. So he was at Duke. I was at USC. And this was at a time.
And you guys knew each other from high school?
Yeah, actually, if you really take it far back, we knew each other from middle school. And the first 4 employees, we actually all grew up together in Seattle.
Got it.
And so
the lesson we can take from this is if your kid hasn't thought of a company by middle school, it's probably not going to happen?
Yeah, actually, you don't have to have thought of the company, but if you don't know your co-founders by middle school, it's not going to happen.
Okay.
That's the actual lesson that I can take from this. Well, actually, it is interesting. So we tend to have like a lot of kids come to Box. I don't know why, but the like classes of high schoolers and middle schoolers, and you can really like scare them by saying like, if you don't know your co-founder right now, how are you gonna succeed? So we all got back together to start Box, but while we were starting it, I was interning at Paramount, and you just saw so much inefficiency with how information was being shared. They were actually running Lotus Notes at the time, and so it was very, very obvious that there needed to be better systems for collaborating around content and working with information.
So draw us the landscape. When you started Box, I mean, where were we in internet years? What was going on? And how is it that someone who is young and perhaps spent more time on Facebook-like tools than on enterprise software tools thought, I think I'll start an enterprise company?
Yeah, well, we technically didn't start it just on the enterprise. We wanted to sort of power kind of all kinds of experiences. But the landscape, if you do the backdrop, it was sort of like a drought on the internet.
What year are we?
So we thought of the idea in 2004.
Okay.
So we're going on about 10 years thinking about files, which is just far too long to think about files.
A long time.
But basically, the original idea, does anybody remember Xdrive? Yep, okay. Any like active Xdrive users in here? You're nodding. You're like just a power Xdrive user? Okay. So you remember like Xdrive, Yahoo Briefcase, any big Yahoo Briefcase fans? You could put like 3 files into Yahoo Briefcase. And so there were a bunch of these things that emerged in the late 90s. And the idea was really, really sound, right? You should be able to have storage on the internet that would let you put all your files in the cloud and then be able to access them from any kind of device and be able to share them with anyone. And the problem was that storage was too expensive, bandwidth was too limited, browsers, we were on IE5 at the time, and we didn't have any mobile devices. So you really didn't need to access your files from that many locations, and it was really cost prohibitive to build out these technologies. So by the time 2004 rolled around, when we looked at the market again, everything had changed, right? Most people had either cable internet or fiber in offices. You had Firefox was just starting to emerge, so you could really finally build rich applications on the internet, and we had multiple devices that we wanted to work from. So like it was like within your site that you would want to get access to your files from your Palm Trio. And so the idea was, in this new heterogeneous device world, how do you get to your information from anywhere? And that was the idea that really led to Box.
And we're still at this point pre-iPad, pre-iPhone, right?
Pre-iPhone, yes.
Pre-iPhone.
Yep.
So you guys got together. Tell us a little bit about the beginning of the company's history.
Yeah, so I started with Dylan first. He was out at Duke while I was at USC, so we connected up, and we kind of built a little prototype version of the product, put it online. He was he sort of like financially backed the company. He had like $10,000 in poker winnings, so he was the financier of the company. And
I mean, given that he was one of your best friends, were you just not good at poker?
Yes, I think it was all my $10,000. So I should probably have even more equity. But no, he was really good at online poker. So he was one of those guys that had like the 9 screens going at once, and basically like all you have to do is win 1% of the time more than everybody else, and you're fine. But so he and I connected. We sort of launched this prototype version, and all of a sudden, people started signing up. Not massively. This is not like a Snapchat story, but basically, people started signing up, and we started to see all these new use cases for how people wanted to use their data and their files. So we actually pitched Mark Cuban to invest in the company, and he did. And so in the summer of 2005, Mark invested. That led us to realizing maybe there'd be a bigger opportunity here than we kind of had initially imagined. So we dropped out of school later that year and then moved to the Bay Area, up to Berkeley, actually, at first.
And how did you get Mark's attention?
So Mark is actually he will respond to emails if you just cold email him. Does anybody ever email Mark Cuban? Yes, right? Did he respond? Yeah. Great. Right, perfect.
Public service announcement.
So he's really good at privacy, online privacy, but but you can just email him, and there's like greater than a 94% chance he'll respond. So he responded, and we were like totally shocked. Like we had pitched a bunch of investors, and nobody had responded. Nobody was interested in the company. We dropped off a business prospectus at Paul Allen's house. Did not get a reply back to that one. And Mark Cuban was the real first kind of legitimate investor that had responded to us, and so he invested in the company, and it was really exciting. He wrote us a check without ever meeting us, kind of weird, but he invested in the company, and we kind of used that as an impetus to drop out of college and move up to the Bay.
So you dropped out of college. That's almost a sort of a de rigueur for a successful young internet entrepreneur.
Especially in enterprise software. So yeah. So.
So at the beginning, were you more focused on consumers then?
No, we basically just had a horizontal view of the space. We had, we started the company with a specific use case in mind, which was our own problem of we're moving between lots of computers in classrooms and at school. We're sharing with lots of colleagues in projects. And as soon as we zoomed out, we saw that businesses had a bunch of use cases for their files and for their data, and consumers had a bunch of use cases as well around photos and media. So the idea was to build a very, very broad platform that could serve all of these use cases. What eventually happened was, and I kind of blame you and the media, there were a bunch of rumors that G Drive was coming out. And this was, if you remember, early 2006.
I think I wrote that story.
I think so. So the G Drive was sort of this product that Google was baking in the background, and we just started getting really freaked out. We said if G Drive is going to enter the space, and Microsoft would eventually maybe have something, and Apple would eventually maybe have something. They had MobileMe at the time, which is sort of the predecessor to iCloud. Right. So we thought that over time the consumer space would get heavily commoditized, and it would be very hard for us to compete in the consumer space. But in the enterprise industry, right, when you look at who was serving most enterprise storage and data needs, right, you have some fairly legacy companies that weren't innovating, like EMC, NetApp, Oracle, Microsoft with SharePoint, so a bunch of legacy products that we thought we could kind of improve upon relative to our ability to execute in a differentiated way in the consumer space. So we ultimately said, okay, for the survival of the business ultimately, we are going to need to focus on the enterprise market, and we shifted all of our resources towards the enterprise space in very early 2007. Very
early 2007. And then, of course, right around then, the iPhone and then subsequently the iPad was launched, and that was a big business moment for you guys, right? Yeah, so
I think, iPhone probably changed every single person's business, in really, really interesting ways, and it has enabled some amazing businesses as well when you think about the Ubers of the world that wouldn't have existed without the iPhone. In our case, the iPhone and the iPad, and I think this is true of most sort of enterprise kind of disruptive products, the iPad and the iPhone were catalysts for a shift in the IT architecture of an enterprise. So I remember going and pitching venture capitalists in 2006 and 2007 that we were going to become an enterprise software company. And most of the VCs, I actually think at the time, and this is I think this was probably the right move for most of them, was that it was going to be very, very hard to compete with Microsoft in the enterprise, because there was no sort of key change in the IT architecture that was going to demand cloud computing from a startup. The view was Microsoft would get there eventually, and they would do it on their own time, and customers would be fine with that. And again, that was probably true prior to the iPhone and the iPad. So our only pitch at the time was we were a much simpler product, and we could help companies share with outside partners and outside colleagues from their business. And that wasn't really enough of a catalyst, they believe, for enterprises to adopt this solution kind of at a large scale.
Right.
And so there was one, we got very lucky. We got turned down about 22 times or whatever for our Series B, but one investor said yes. This was Mamoon Hamid at USVP. And so we eventually were in a position that as soon as the iPhone came out, within a couple weeks, we were able to start to build applications and interfaces for the iPhone. And Microsoft took about 5 years to respond. So that, generally, if you have a 5-year lead on your incumbent, it's a pretty positive thing for a startup. So we got very lucky. Frankly, this was not.
You're joking, Aaron, but you just want to stop you there. I mean,
yeah.
You're
I'm not joking, but yeah, okay. we had a 5-year lead. So
a 5-year lead is not all that it takes to win. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of good ideas that they're never able to execute on, and you were at that time competing with Microsoft, which was far beyond the dominant player, and that was it.
Yeah. Well, and we still are. I mean, I think Microsoft is, especially under Satya, they have a major push that is going to make them a lot more, I think, effective in the enterprise and in the cloud space. But having a window of opportunity that wide is very unusual, and we certainly tried to execute and capitalize on that as much as possible.
So at that point, you guys were really about cloud computing. You have grown into a much larger software play. How would you describe your product?
Yeah, so the first focus was how do we help companies share their files, collaborate around their files across all the devices that they're working from, but we want that really to be a feature of the platform. So that is, in our view, is an extension of all of the capabilities that you can do with Box. And so today, most of our energy goes really at the platform level of our innovation. So how do we build out better tools to help you manage information? How do we build out better security features to give you analytics and control of your content in ways that you wouldn't have had before? And then a lot of things in our developer ecosystem to help you extend information in Box into other applications. So in 5 years from now, I think if you look at our product or company, it'll be much more of what has been built on Box as opposed to just the features that you think of as Box today, which is really file sharing and file collaboration. And so we're doing a lot in a number of different industries, but Box will show up in very different ways if you're using us in a life sciences company, if you're using us in healthcare, if you're using us in manufacturing, because there'll be so many different kinds of applications built on top of our platform that we would like to be powering and really changing the nature of IT and enterprise software.
And what are your biggest industries? I mean, we talked about entertainment. I know you're HIPAA certified, right?
Yeah.
So where do you have the most users? That nod.
HIPAA certified is really fun. So so healthcare was our fastest growing vertical last year, and that was very much due to the HIPAA certification. And if you think about it, what's really exciting is you have in just healthcare alone, right? You have such a tremendous amount of data and people that need access to that data that have been locked in these silos simply because of the protective nature of the healthcare space, where you don't want to be at risk for personally identifiable information being shared or leaking outside of an organization.
Right.
So until there were HIPAA compliant cloud solutions, it was very, very hard for healthcare companies or hospitals or payers and insurance providers to be able to exchange data and share securely. So for that industry, as an example, what we're trying to do is bring a software layer that can add a lot more collaboration between doctors and researchers and patients, and be able to hopefully make either discoveries faster or be able to deliver patient care much faster. So we have a number of companies where a number of hospitals where all of the doctors are on iPads, and all of the information that they're getting is stored in a medical image library or a medical resource library that's being pulled down from the cloud, and that's the kind of speed and agility that you wouldn't have had even 3 or 4 years ago. And so, another example of how the iPad enters an industry and begins to really change how people are accessing information in that space. What we're seeing in a lot of categories, which is driving a lot of our growth, is all of a sudden the sort of definition of a knowledge worker is changing pretty rapidly. So we have retail companies that are installing iPads for all of the retail store workers, or we have industrial equipment rental companies. So if you need to go rent a tractor, which I'm sure many of us do, there's a company called Sunbelt Rentals, and they basically have their entire field team on iPads, and that's a worker that 5 years ago we wouldn't have considered a knowledge worker because they don't go to their desk and they don't work with Microsoft Office on their PC, but now they're working from an iPad, they're pulling down information, and as an enterprise software provider, we now have a much larger market that we can go serve. So you're starting to see a lot of growth areas in spaces that we would never have predicted, whether that was doctors in healthcare, or pilots in the airline industry, or field workers in industrial companies.
So Aaron, when are you getting to these customers? So the Sunbelt, what is it? Sunbelt
Rentals.
customers.
Yep.
Are you getting to Sunbelt Rentals right in the shift when they realize that they need the iPads as the first software they're using on the new devices?
Yeah, so somewhere around this new set of devices that people want to access from, or sometimes there's a changing of the guard in the IT leadership that can sometimes occur. So you'll have a new IT leader come in, they'll take a look at the landscape of what the company has been running off of and realize, wait a second, we can save millions of dollars if we moved our ERP system to Workday or NetSuite, our email system to Google, our SharePoint and content systems to something like Box, and we're at that moment of change. So we're among many other companies that I think are seeing this sort of positive inflection.
Right.
But iPads drive it, IT sort of epiphanies drive it, and the end users of the company that are bringing these applications into work are driving it as well. So
there's a huge amount of competition in this space, both from legacy folks like Microsoft, EMC, there's Citrix, there's...
I can get you the whole list if you'd like.
Yeah. Great. And then there's like the new guys like Dropbox, which began as a consumer product but is veered toward the enterprise. What differentiates you guys?
Yeah, so I think it's a very competitive landscape as you diagnosed, which is very interesting because I've been in the space now since '04 when I wish we could go back to the days where all I had to do was compete with Yahoo Briefcase. Those were better times. But
3 files, you said, 3 files.
They gave you I think 10 or 15 megabytes of free space. So you could, if you made your PowerPoint small enough, you could probably put 4 files up into Yahoo. But so yeah, we have a very formidable set of competitors, and I think our unique differentiation is something which is kind of core to our DNA, which is we focus on building end user software that is going to sort of either meet or exceed the experiences that you're going to get from the consumer landscape, but we do it in a way that lets an enterprise, particularly in a regulated industry, particularly at scale, to be able to implement Box in their business. So when you think about Procter & Gamble or Schneider Electric or Eli Lilly or Disney and their ability to standardize on a cloud platform for their files and content, our ability to go serve a business that has tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees, but deliver an experience that is consumer grade or even in some cases exceeds the consumer experiences because of our focus on the business workflows. We think that's really our core differentiation, and that's at least gotten us to where we are now. We think that continues to hold up, and then beneath that...
So is the translation of that for me, the knowledge worker at Sunbelt Rentals, that it's easy to use? My business can depend on it, but I, as a worker, don't need to do a lot in order to understand it?
If we're doing our job properly, you as a worker see nothing different from all the consumer solutions that you're using.
Right.
But on the IT side, on the security side, you have a differentiated level of visibility and control and compliance and security and integrations and then platform capabilities. And it's that package which you can't get from the Microsofts of the world because they're only going to solve the enterprise problems, or in many cases the consumer companies because they might not go as deep as we will on the enterprise side. So it's that sort of pairing of those two models which we think is fairly unique in this category. But we also think it's going to be the definition of how enterprise software companies in the future are built up. You need to have consumer DNA at your core, but you need to be able to deliver an enterprise value proposition that allows large companies to adopt your technology.
So specifically, you guys are often paired with and sometimes confused with Dropbox. You both have Box in your name.
Yeah.
How do you sort of...
I think we were about 2 or 3 years before them though on the use of Box. So we're happy about that.
So Box is yours. You got that.
Box is ours, yes.
How do the two companies compare? What do you want consumers to understand about how yours is different?
Yeah, so I don't know how Drew would answer this, but I would say that again, our focus is we're going to go much deeper in the enterprise market. So if you are again a life sciences company and you're doing drug research, we're going to have a set of capabilities that we think are going to be unparalleled, not only respective to Dropbox, but really any other kind of platform that's out there. So things like the ability to build custom applications that have metadata that can actually string together a workflow on top of content in Box is something that's going to be very unique to our platform. When you apply that to manufacturing, when you apply that to the media industry, you start to see a bunch of different kinds of workflows and ways that companies can collaborate around their information that we're going to do very, very differently. As a consumer, I think our products will show up in similar lights. It's fairly hard. I mean, this was our thesis in '06, which was consumers aren't going to see a high degree of differentiation from these products. As long as you're getting to your files from any device that you want, your general sort of file access problem is being mostly solved. And so we have to sort of meet and exceed that set of expectations, but there's not like a 10x way to exceed that, right? It's sort of binary. You're either getting to your files or you're not. When you zoom out and look at the enterprise and their ability and need to have control of that information and scale it up in their business, that's where you see very, very different levels of focus and functionality that we're going to be pushing for.
So if I'm a consumer using Box-powered software, do I or a worker, a knowledge worker using Box-powered software, do I necessarily know that it's Box?
Today, yes, simply because the vast majority of our activity comes directly on Box.com or it goes into our mobile apps. In 5 years from now, I actually think that you might see us less and less relative to the overall pie that we're serving. So you might still see us as much in sort of in absolute terms,
right.
But there'll be so many other applications in your business that hopefully we're involved in powering or integrating with. So we have a big developer conference on March 26th, which will be announcing a new set of APIs, and those APIs will go further toward applications being built on Box that you would have no idea that we're sort of underneath. And we think that's very exciting because we're building a lot of technology, whether it's security technology, whether it's identity management technology, whether it's content storage and collaboration features that we think we can expose as APIs to accelerate the development of products that deal with content. And if we can do that, then hopefully there's going to be a lot of change in the space and a lot more opportunity for third-party partners.
So it sounds like developers are incredibly important.
Hugely important.
So describe your developer community.
Yeah, so we have about 30,000 developers right now on the platform, and a lot of the applications are, mobile applications, ways that you can do new types of things with your content. So note-taking or board of directors use cases or financial services use cases for moving around financial content, all of these sort of extended applications where Box is never going to build the core functionality of some industry, but we want our partners to. There's a cool app called Dr. Chrono. They let you, as a healthcare provider, manage all of your patients, and Box is the underlying sort of file management capability in that product.
How long have they been around?
They've been around for a couple years now. So we are working with a number of applications that will go deeper in verticals than we would ever be able to. And we have APIs that help them do that. And that's sort of the core set of use cases, but we're starting to see a proliferation of completely new ideas that we would have never predicted. So last week, for instance, I got myself into a Twitter battle about drones. And
I caught that.
And I was enlightened that because it turns out that a commercial drone company is using the Box API to store images from their drones. So if you think about all of the commercial applications of drones now, where you have aerial imagery of an agriculture business and a farm, you have the ability to provide security operations or better visibility if you're on a construction site. We have all these new use cases for these autonomous vehicles and or drones, and the data needs to be stored somewhere that they're generating. And so we would never have predicted that we'd have a drone strategy, and now we do because of our API and because of our developer ecosystem. So there's going to be
you have a drone strategy.
We literally have a drone strategy. Like I'm writing like a manifesto for drones right now. So
share.
Yeah, maybe I'll publish it at some point.
When you find out about something like that, I mean,
Yes.
How do you think about that?
I get very excited. I think it's the Bill Joyce quote is, you'll never have as many of the smart people in the world as you need right within your company, right? There's far more talent out in the world than is within your building, and that's why Sun was so focused on building out developer systems. And this is why you build developer platforms. We would never have predicted use cases in the commercial, in the enterprise industry with drones, but now we're actually we have an interesting role to play there. So you could imagine the same thing for satellites that are generating images. So there's so much more data that as an enterprise you can now capture and work with. And we think this is going to eventually change really the nature of how business gets done and the nature of the economy. When you move from an industrial-oriented economy to now an information-oriented economy, there's going to be so many new ways that we need to use data and work with our information to create competitive advantage. And so building enterprise software today is more, at least for us, and we drink a lot of our own kind of weird enterprise software Kool-Aid, the future of the enterprise is going to be defined by the IT systems and by a lot of the software that's being built today. So the way that you're going to compete in the healthcare industry, the way that you're going to compete in manufacturing, the way that you're going to compete in consumer packaged goods will be heavily driven and influenced by the technology that is driving your business. And so it's very, very exciting to be building out these products that are going to change how companies work.
So as Box becomes a platform, you see people doing things you never would have guessed on that platform, the drone strategy. Give us another example of something that blew your mind.
Yeah, well, okay, fine. So one more. Anybody like Beyonce in here? Oh, good, okay. So that's weird. I think some people didn't raise their hand. So
figures.
So yet another kind of thing that kind of blew us away. We had no idea that was happening. So Beyonce released this album that was sort of a surprise album. And this was about a month and a half ago. And it was a pretty innovative strategy where all of a sudden one day they just sort of revealed that she was doing this new album, and it was distributed everywhere all at once online. And all of the launch materials, all the marketing assets, all of the digital content around the launch was distributed through Box on this sort of custom portal that the record label put together. And so the ability now to communicate with hundreds of thousands of in this case, on the B2B side, all the partners and e-commerce vendors and journalists and influencers, the ability to move information out on demand at scale is something that's very, very new to that industry. And so we were the underlying technology that powered that. So kind of completely out of nowhere, we got an email saying, make sure that your site stays up. Beyonce's album is being released. So usually we don't connect those two things. So in this case, that was a really exciting experience that kind of came out of nowhere. And we're seeing just more and more of these very, very different types of use cases. We're going to be launching a new API at our developer conference, which we think will go towards powering yet another set of ways that you would never have thought to use content. So I think the one hint I would give is, if you think about today, any website you go to on the internet that has video, you expect to be able to just play it wherever you are. And that was an innovation that we, really YouTube kind of started, but now any application that deals with video, you just expect to be able to stream it online. The same is not true of documents and of more sort of document-oriented content. So when you think about PowerPoints and Word documents and spreadsheets, all of this content you generally still have to download and work with locally. So we're going to be launching a set of APIs and services that might change how you start to experience content online, which the whole point of is we have to be able to do that in an extended way through the developer ecosystem as opposed to just through our application.
So let's talk a little bit about the future of the enterprise.
Yes.
So, particularly with enterprise software companies, over the last decade, we've seen them roll up and get larger and larger and larger and larger. And now it seems like even the strongest, the IBMs of the world, are really flagging. What does an enterprise software company of the future look like? How's it structured?
Yeah, I think we have the benefit of, in our case, of sort of trailing companies like Salesforce.com or Workday in a lot of large enterprises, and these are the same companies that we're serving, but usually, Benioff has gotten to them first, and so you can start to see how a company, if you first start on the customer side, and you think about how does a customer want IT to be delivered to them, that can start to describe then what you need to do as a service provider for the enterprise of the future. And if you think about what we can now do with technology within an enterprise, this gives you a lot of the answers. So in our environment, as an example, we have about 1,000 employees now. We have maybe one or two applications that are on-premise. Every single thing in our business is in the cloud. So we use Zendesk, we use Zuora, we use Workday, we use NetSuite, we use Gmail. We are effectively completely in the cloud. We use Box, obviously, and so all of our information is distributed out against these servers, and our ability to now orchestrate these tools together, our ability to add new technology into our environment instantly is obviously what we can now do. So So our IT function begins to evolve pretty dramatically. And we're seeing this at a lot of customers, where if you're no longer in the business of managing data centers and managing servers and managing software and all of the technologies that integrate those systems, but instead you're in the business of finding what technology is best suited to a problem and actually implementing technology for driving business results, this begins to change the nature of the CIO, and this begins to change the nature of the IT organization. So that means that as a software vendor, we have to make sure that we're not delivering systems to our customers, but we're delivering really business results and a business platform to our customers. So the only way to do that then is that you build software that users want to adopt. You build open systems that customers can integrate with one another, right? You can't have the same kind of proprietary, sort of vertically integrated systems as we had, 5 or 10 or 15 years ago that sort of defined the enterprise. You have to be a lot more elastic, right? You can't, be in a situation where the customer has to call you and wait 2 months to have the software procured in their organization because they're just going to go to Amazon or somewhere else to use it on demand. This changes how you go to market, right? You want to design your software to be viral so it can be adopted very easily throughout an organization, because a lot of these companies are going to want to expect that you're driving the adoption of your technology in their company.
Aaron, who are you talking to within companies? Because at one point, all software sales went through a CIO. That's less true now. A lot of times the CMO is buying a lot more software. Increasingly that's so. Are you still mostly selling the CIOs? Yeah,
so I think that the role of the CIO actually will, it's going to change pretty dramatically, because they are no longer in a position where they control the entire perimeter of their company and what information and what technologies are within their organization. Because of the proliferation of these consumer apps and devices that people are bringing in. At the same time, I actually think their role is going to increase in importance in terms of defining the technology strategy of a company. So yes, there's going to be a mass sort of consumer push of technology in the organization. At the same time, most of these companies are going to find more competitive ways of using data and technology for their business. And the CIO is generally, and sometimes it's the CDO, sometimes it's the CTO, but if you think about most companies that are sort of blue chip organizations, the CIO is most responsible for driving the technology strategy of that organization. And more than ever before, you're going to see companies either compete or not compete based on what technology they're using to run their business. And so I actually think the role of the CIO increases in importance, but it just is very, very different from what they're working on. And so yes, we sell mostly to CIOs still, but it's heavily influenced, and any kind of sale is heavily influenced by both end users as well as other champions in the company that maybe wouldn't have been the case 10 years ago, which is the CMO or head of sales, or in some cases the CEO. So who you have to work with and who you have to influence is changing pretty dramatically as an enterprise software company.
Got it. And so just a little bit on the company, and then we're going to open up to questions pretty soon, so start baking them in your mind. You guys where are your headquarters?
Los Altos.
And you said you're close to 1,000?
Yes. Yeah, well, I think we passed 1,000 today.
Do you have offices out? Where else do you guys have offices?
We have about 100 people in Europe, in London. We have a massive 5 people in Japan. So building on our Japanese operations as we speak. Very excited about that.
Why Japan?
Japan actually is either the second or third largest sort of cloud environment. So again, Salesforce got there very, very early and drove a lot of demand of cloud services. And there's such a dominant focus on IT systems and technology in Japan. So it's just a massive market for any software company.
Aaron, you've referenced Salesforce a couple of times.
Yes.
And CEO Mark Benioff. Do you see him as the founding father of this new era of enterprise?
He is he's sort of the Yoda of enterprise software in the cloud, and so he's been very helpful to the company. They actually invested about 2 or 3 rounds ago, and he's generally driven a lot of the demand for the cloud. Right? If you go into most companies and you survey, most large companies and you survey what cloud services they're using, Salesforce is sort of the predominant cloud solution, and has actually encouraged most CIOs to realize, wait a second, why do I want to be in the business of managing an on-premise CRM system, probably where I'm having
CRM, sorry, just for the 2 members of our audience.
I promise you, no one woke up at 9:30 in the morning to come to this talk that doesn't know the word CRM. So, and if you did, you're definitely in the wrong room right now. So, okay, who doesn't know CRM? And then we should just have a conversation about this. Okay, so customer relationship management software, and so there's not a CIO in the world. Should I define CIO right now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so there's not a.
Ouch.
No. I'm just for everybody else. No,
yeah,
you're good.
Not for me.
Okay, there's not a CIO in the world that wants to manage customer relationship management software, right? Yeah. If you implemented Siebel back in the 90s, right? You'd probably have to put 10 or 20 people plus millions of dollars in consulting contracts just to manage the servers that are going to be in your data center, and you're going to have release cycles that are every 2 or 3 years, and it's going to take forever to be able to actually get innovation out of those products and get them distributed in your company. So all of a sudden, when you put in something like Salesforce, and now your sales team can work from anywhere, you get centralized dashboards of all of your sales data, and everybody's way happier because the software is so much simpler. And now as a CIO, you're not managing these servers that are very undifferentiated relative to all of the other things that you need to compete on. This just blows your mind, right? And it's so much easier now to do IT. So that's very obvious for any company that's 5, 10, 50, 100 people. But where that's fairly sort of enlightening is if you're GE, and now all of a sudden you're not managing hundreds or thousands of pieces of technology like that, but now you can deliver cloud solutions. That changes everything about delivering IT in your organization. So most companies that have either bought Salesforce or Workday or Google Apps realize how powerful this trend is, and that gets them to wanting to move everything that they can to the cloud. So you're going to see over the next 5 or 10 years, basically every workload that is not sort of the defining workload of that company. So there might be a few specific processes and few specific types of data that a company just keeps on premise simply because there's some perception of security. But otherwise, every single thing is going to move to the cloud over the next 5 to 10 years simply because the competitive nature of how these companies are going to be working is going to require it. So you're not going to want to be the one company that manages 5 or 10 data centers when all of your peers have everything in the cloud and their company's moving way faster. So that's going to just require you to move to cloud solutions. On that note, we're going to move to some audience questions. Oh, cool. Would anyone like to kick us off? Okay, so hold on one second. Do we have a mic coming? Okay, where's the mic? Oh, it's way back there. Okay, yeah, you're going to have to get up. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question, please make your way to the mic where we will have a delicate line. And when you ask a question, if you could begin with your name and organization. Yes, and just let me know if you're competing with us or not.
Hey, Aaron.
Hey.
My name's Steven Rubenstone. I'm an engineer and the founder of a startup called Collaborism that I've been building in college.
Cool. Wow.
And
you're in college right now?
I just graduated, actually.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Keep that degree.
One of your employees I went to high school with, David Eckstein, he actually introduced me to Box and got me interested in the story. But a question I always kind of dreamed of asking you was a couple of, I don't know when it was that you did this, but what's famous about your story was the pivot, how you moved into that B2B model, and you kind of said, hey, that's how Box is going to run. That's how I'm going to turn this into a successful company.
That's an exact quote, actually.
How did you make that decision? How did you go from thinking about it to actually executing on it and doing that?
Great question. I mean, it was fairly simple. We basically were at this juncture where if we continue down the consumer path, we didn't think we could differentiate, as I mentioned. If we went the enterprise path, we would have to change almost the entire DNA and set of resources in the company. So we were only about 15 or 20 people at the time. It was a little bit easier than if we had to steer the ship that Microsoft would have to do or whatever if they were to make a similar kind of shift. And so what we did was we kind of redrafted the business plan of the company. We changed sort of the economics of how we were going to sell, who we were going to sell to, what that was going to be priced at. We started hiring a slightly different DNA, but importantly, not just your standard enterprise software set of people, but a sort of fusion of consumer-y enterprise people, which in 2007 there were less of, and now it's actually becoming more of a trend to have this sort of hybrid kind of knows consumer, knows enterprise type of individual. And then we just basically, the rest comes from customers, right? As long as you understand what the customer wants to buy and what they're going to need to from an innovation standpoint, then your product roadmap changes, then how you sell to them changes, then how you deliver your services to them change, your investor mix changes. All of these things come together in a different way, and you fast forward a couple of years, and you have a very, very different looking company. So we sort of just went with what the market needed at the time, and that ultimately changed what the company looked like.
Great. Next.
Hi, my name's Adam Justice. I work for a networking products company called Grid Connect, and we also have a consumer brand of wireless sensors called Connect Sense.
Did you go to college?
I did go to college.
Good. Okay.
And we're a customer too.
Oh,
so
wow, thank you.
I was just wondering, obviously Snowden today, that's
Yes.
a big subject. What has changed this year in terms of security, and do you have a lot of people that are paranoid that the NSA is spying on their files, things like that?
Yeah, I can say that the NSA did wonders for our German footprint. So that didn't help things at all. But for the most part, I think all of our customers have always been paranoid about security. If you're the CISO or the CIO of a large financial institution or a life sciences company or a healthcare organization, any leak of data or any inappropriate access to information is your job is on the line. So anytime you implement any technology, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud, you're making a really, really significant call for the protection of your company. So what we've done to respond to a lot of this is push even harder from a security standpoint, and this is ultimately our differentiation. So we invest deeply in network security, physical security, information security, partnerships that give our customers better visibility into how their data is being used, a bunch of functionality that gives you better control and analytics around your content. So the only reason that a record label would do their launch of Beyonce's album on Box is because they know in advance of that none of the data is going to be able to get anywhere or leave the group of people they want to share with, because they have better analytics around how their content is being used than any other platform that they can go with. So I would say that our customers are absolutely paranoid of this, and we are equally paranoid because this is what we spend a lot of time on. Obviously from an NSA standpoint, the government completely overreached, and we need to make sure that there's a little bit of a very significant shift in how the government starts to think about internet and cyber spying and their access and working with the technology industry.
How do you talk to folks about security? Because it occurs to me that you only need one goof up to blow your reputation in this space. But if you haven't had one goof up, then every product that hasn't had a goof up looks the same to the consumer.
Yeah, so what tends to happen in a large enterprise is you're now, because of consumerization of IT, you have this massive fragmentation of where all your data and information is going.
Right.
So any company today, the IT model of sort of the 80s and the 90s was, and up until the 2000s, was sort of a perimeter-based security and IT model. And the idea was, if I could secure all of my information that's in my organization and all of the applications and devices that people used, right? Because the desktop computer was just going to stay on the desktop, so I could have a perimeter-based security model, and that was going to keep me safe. And so anybody outside of the company that wanted to be able to access information or that you wanted to be able to share with, I had to let into that perimeter.
Right.
Which means I opened up these sort of DMZs, and I would open up these zones that people would be able to access information from. And so I'd be opening up the VPN, I'd have to get people on my identity system, and that was actually, that was an entirely cumbersome process that took way too long, that actually limited a lot of the collaboration that the companies were trying to do. So today, fast forward to 2014, you have people accessing data from every kind of device that gets created. You have hundreds of consumer solutions that people are working with and using to do their jobs fundamentally. And you're now collaborating outside of the boundaries of your business more and more than ever before. There's not a single piece of data that has to be used to drive some kind of business result that probably won't leave your network, right? It has to be shared with a customer, a client, a partner, a vendor, a supplier, a contractor. Your data is fundamentally going everywhere because it's actually driving business results. So the security solutions that we generally implement are, if you could have a platform that can help you share all of this data and people can access it from anywhere, and it all goes into one place, into one sort of container for your content, then you get profoundly different visibility and the ability to create policies, the ability to get new kinds of analytics around how your information is being shared, who it's being shared with, on what networks is it being shared, and that gives you visibility that you would never have had in an on-premise world. So in many cases, our customers are adopting us because we exceed, and us as in any kind of cloud solution, because we actually exceed the security or exceed the visibility you get from any kind of on-premise solution. So the security you get from a Salesforce at this point is far better than what you would get with on-premise CRM, simply because you now have a way better ecosystem of tools that you can use to know how your information is being used.
Great. Next question.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
G'day, Aaron.
Good
My
day.
name's Wayne. I'm from Australia. Question for you as it relates to the pivot you made from consumer to enterprise.
Yes.
How did you find that dealing with the VC community and getting them interested in the shift?
Well, not well, but that was sort of a point in time that I think is very different today. So in 2007, you only had, I believe only NetSuite and Salesforce and SuccessFactors were sort of the public companies, and maybe Concur were kind of public examples of enterprise software companies that had done really well in the cloud. There just wasn't enough sort of a comparable set that investors could compare against. And we were coming in as 22 and 23-year-olds saying that we were going to take what was a consumer tool and move it to the enterprise. And we didn't know we didn't know anything about the enterprise, frankly, at the time. So I would not have invested in us at the time. So the space is very different today because now you have Splunk and ServiceNow and Tableau, and you have, now Salesforce is a $40 billion company. Like, that's incredible, right? It was maybe a $4 billion company at the time that we were trying to pitch this pivot. So everything about the enterprise world is different, which is incredibly exciting for anybody building enterprise software. And you have not only great comps that are driving a lot of the demand from the investor side, but you have a pretty significant shift in the scale of these markets. So enterprise software, and I think only forward-thinking investors realize this, but the enterprise software industry is only it's about a $300 billion market, which is very large, but that's based on mostly just legacy systems, like desktop, PC-based, on-premise software. When you imagine a world where you have now 1.5 billion mobile workers, where you have software that can define every kind of job function, and you have specific software for every single vertical, I think we're going to see a 2 or 3xing of the enterprise software market. And there's a lot of investors that are very savvy and realize this. And very, very small example, there's one of our investors, one of our early investors, Emergence Capital, invested in this company very early on called Viva. And this was the exact kind of company. Who knows Viva in here? Okay, so Viva is a life sciences focused sort of CRM company. And this is the exact kind of company that would never have worked on Sand Hill Road in 2003 or 2004. They were basically pitching CRM just for pharmaceutical and life science companies. So they basically got an investment from the Emergence Capital, and I think they gave them like $5-10 million. And that became, I think, $1.5 billion. Viva went public about, I think, Q2 or Q3 of last year. It's a $4 billion company now. And it's the exact kind of thing that you can now do at scale because you have customers that are ready, you have platforms that are mature enough, you have a security model that works for the enterprise, and investors are very encouraged by that. So you're starting to see a lot more investment happening at the enterprise in the enterprise landscape. So I would say that go at it.
Great. We have time for 2 more questions, and we have 2 more askers.
Hey, Aaron. My name is Ben, and I work in an advertising agency called Team One. I was wondering, well, I imagine, selling into the enterprise that your sales team drives the majority of your sales and acquiring new customers. But I was curious about what marketing strategies are most effective for you guys right now, and how are those differing from when you were a much smaller company?
Yeah. So the shift in the marketing landscape is interesting. 15 years ago, if you were an enterprise software company and you wanted to get to your customers, it would be mostly a sales and marketing driven exercise. Today, we have the benefit of these tools are now organically adopted within companies. We have 25 million end users, and all of those end users essentially brought the software into work on their own. So we think about channels like mobile distribution in a way that you would never have thought before in the enterprise software landscape, right? The ability, just at a minimum, to use iTunes as a distribution channel for enterprise software is such a compelling model because we run into customers all the time where the only reason they heard about us was because of the app marketplace on iTunes. And so that just is a new channel that didn't exist just a couple of years ago. And but still, I think today the #1 driver of all of our demand and growth is still at the end user level. So we're very fortunate because we have a product that is virally oriented in its nature. Anybody that you're sharing content or files with, that means that somebody else is accessing that content, which sort of drives this very positive and virtuous cycle. And then in terms of pure advertising, we haven't discovered anything that's totally super effective, so it's still kind of the feet on the street sales approach. Then we try and meet with CIOs as much as we can and get them as interested in the cloud as possible.
Final question?
Okay, this better be really good.
Good. My name is Greg Head. I'm with Infusionsoft. We make sales and marketing software for the very small businesses, like Salesforce for the under 10 employee crowd.
Awesome.
Your confidential IPO has been reported recently in Bloomberg and others, and I know you can't speak about that directly, yes. But it's boom time for enterprise cloud tech and SaaS B2B.
Yeah.
How do you think it's affecting CEOs and founders like yourselves in Silicon Valley with the challenges and opportunities of being in public?
Well, I can't answer most of that question, but I will say that it's really, really exciting to be in the enterprise software industry right now, and I highly recommend it for everybody, unless again, you're competing with me, in which case I recommend the consumer internet, and there's still great opportunities there. But no, I think, again, we were 6 or 7 years ago, enterprise software, we were like the lepers of the technology ecosystem, and now it's actually changing pretty dramatically, and there's a lot of excitement. And again, it's driven because you can now build consumer-like companies for the enterprise. So the design instincts, the software instincts, if you look at our company, we have, just as an example, we have 3 stories in Los Altos. The second sort of floor of the building is our engineering. And every single person on the engineering and product and design floor probably came from a consumer company. So we are building software at sort of consumer internet scale. On the 3rd floor is our sales team. And most of those people came from enterprise software companies. And so even the leadership of the company breaks out like that. So we've actually had to fuse consumer development, the ability to release our software every single day, continuous integration. All of those instincts come from the consumer internet, but we still have to go sell to and service our enterprise customers in a way that is going to be commensurate with their needs at scale, and that's going to come from really enterprise talent. So the shift in how you build an enterprise software company is incredibly exciting. It means that you're building a different kind of DNA, a different kind of culture, but it also means that it's getting more recognition in Silicon Valley, and it's a lot more fun to be a part of.
Great. So Aaron, just to summarize a little bit, we've heard a lot about the shifting nature of who is a knowledge worker.
Yes.
We've heard a lot about the way that the enterprise company is going to shift to meet a new knowledge worker. And we've heard a lot about the importance of making your co-founders and friends early, like
yes.
middle school.
Middle school.
So that's
particularly if you can be in the middle school band together. We both played trumpet in middle school, yes.
I was a French horn player. I never met anybody I co-founded a company with.
That's too bad. But maybe you should look back in the yearbook and see if you can reignite those relationships.
That's back when the Facebook was paper.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank you very
us
much.
today.
Okay, good luck, everybody. Okay. Okay.